Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming today. I'm Rachel O'Mara, and I'm really excited to host Tosha Silver, who's here to talk today at Google about her book, Outrageous Openness. And I'm excited because I got introduced to Tosha and her work last spring. I got a copy of her earlier version of this book and was fascinated by all of the tales and anecdotes that Tosha had experienced that really told a really good story about things that happened in her life serendipitously and just ways that were more open than others and coincidences. And I just really liked it from a world of figuring out how that related to me and all the coincidences that I've also witnessed in my life. So I'm very excited to bring her in today to talk about her book and to answer questions and to learn and share a little bit more about outrageous openness. So without further ado, let me introduce Tosha. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you all for coming. Let me talk first about what this book is really about, and then I'll give you a few examples. The nature of what drove me to write this, in some ways, really came originally from growing up in a very type A sort of family where there was enormous amounts of drive. It was like an East Coast Jewish family where you really had to prove yourself. I went on to Yale. I had to prove myself there. You know, all that typical stuff, living on the East Coast, the ideas of competition, the ideas of making your mark, making it all happen. What, in a lot of ways, spiritually is called doership, because it's the small self. It's the ego trying to take the lead and prove its worth. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. However, by the time I got to the age of 30, living that way, I had adrenal failure, and I had become quite ill. And I write about it in the book. And I had actually done everything exactly the way that I was trained to do it, and I was very ill. So at that juncture, I kind of had to begin to take apart what I had been taught and go on a spiritual journey to learn a different way to live that involved this outrageous openness, which really, when you get down to, is actually how to let this force of love, it's called different things in different systems, the Tao or the Shakti or God or love or eternity, how to let that force actually take the lead instead of how to let the small self, the mind, the push, the force, the do it now, the if I don't do it, it won't get done, how to let that energy lead, which living in a culture that is very alpha-driven oriented, that's what's rewarded. However, ultimately, that's what can make you, as it happened to me, quite sick. Now, it doesn't always happen that the person gets physically sick, right? I mean, you can just get overwhelmed because there's such a burden. And the burden of it, and this is like, it doesn't matter, even if you're a super person, which in some ways I'm figuring anybody that works at Google is sort of a super person. Just like when I was at Yale, everybody considered themselves super people. And what was happening was that the burden of doership, this idea that if you don't make it happen, it won't happen, is exhausting. And so many things have come in now. Like I know this is the week that people are talking about mindfulness training. And yoga is now infiltrated the culture. I've done yoga for about 20 years. However, very few people talk, even when you're talking about mindfulness, or even when you're talking about yoga, or even when you're talking about meditation. Very few people say, how do you actually let go on a practical level and let anything larger than the ego run things? How do you actually invite this force of love, or invite this great self, this great mind? How do you do it? That's the voyage I was on. Once I got sick and I began to open up, I realized there's lots of information out there, like, oh, you should just surrender. You should take more vacations. You should learn to let go. But that's not actually what this is about. This is about the active invitation. You can actually, and this is really what this book is about, how do you actively invite in the divine? I'm calling the divine love, the Tao. You can call it anything. How do you actively invite this? Almost nobody's writing about that. So this book is way beyond synchronicity and coincidence. This is saying, how do you actually build a relationship to this force of love so that it can begin to guide your life? Because it all sounds good. It's like, oh yeah, surrender sounds great. Or letting go sounds great. But on a pragmatic level, how do you do it? And so, especially in a culture that only rewards, you carry the burden, you make it happen, it's all on you, if you let, blah, 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 blah. And what I began to find is that you can engage with this force of love, just like you would an individual person that you were very excited to meet. You can engage with this force of love on even the most mundane topics. And it will begin to respond back. That great it, that great one, is sort of waiting to engage with us, which is, why Walt Whitman, said in his poetry, the sidewalks are littered with postcards from God. Like everywhere you go, this force is waiting to engage. And all that it's taking is this active invitation. And because it's a culture that's not about invitation, those are considered very passive things. It's about invitation to that force. It's about offering to that force. So I'll give you an example. Like on my way here today, somebody said, well, I was talking to a friend on the phone as I was driving over, and she said, well, aren't you worried? What if there's a lot of people there? Aren't you worried? What if there's no people there? And I was like, it doesn't matter. All the people that need to see this, all the people that need to be in the room are already selected, and they're all going to be there. That's why whoever's here is here. Anybody who needs to see the video later is all going to see the video later. So it sounds like fatalism, but it's really so far beyond that. In the book, it's a term that I call divine selection. And some of these things came from originally from a book with a really hokey name called The Game of Life and How to Play It by this writer back in the 1940s named Florence Scovel Shinn. But these ideas of divine order, divine selection, they all tie to surrender, because what they mean is the perfect route is already picked. It's really how to move with the Tao, if you know anything about, or how to surf the wave. Or how to, rather than, I have friends that are surfers, and they're always saying, oh, this stuff is just like surfing. It's not that you don't go in the water. It's not that you don't train to be a great surfer. But once you're in the wave, you're not there controlling the wave. In fact, if you try to control the wave, you will crash. So it's actually about how to let go and move with things. And the way to move with them is invitation and offering. So that's a lot of what I'm writing about in the book. In a way, you could say it's the divine feminine that's available to everybody, regardless of gender. You're inviting the force of receptivity. So, for example, to go back again, to this idea of, well, aren't you worried? Who's going to hear this? Is a lot of people, is a little people? If it's offered, if I think that this talk, whatever it is, belongs to me, the small self Tosha, that will go nowhere. But if I think, which is honestly how I think, and it's what's in the book, this is an offering to the divine. No matter what you do is an offering to the divine if you're in the right headspace. So whoever's meant to hear it will hear it, because it's now a gift to the divine. I love the statues where, you see the goddesses and they just are holding the lotus in their hands like this, or you see the Buddha holding. everybody is that Buddha to me. Everybody is that goddess or that god. So you're taking whatever it is, and it can be something as mundane as a talk you have to go give to your supervisor, or the date that you have to go on. I love using examples like dates or, a real estate deal, because this is all the stuff we're told isn't spiritual, and it's completely spiritual. There's no separation of mundane and spiritual. So let's say you take something like you're going to go on a date, and everything in the culture will be like, wow, you really better look amazing, and you better wow them. Or same thing, you're going on a job interview, oh, you better be spectacular. All of that is the small self controlling the show. And because it's a culture revering the small self, that's everything we're taught. Now again, it has nothing to do with not preparing or not making yourself however way you are your best. But it's that the action is actually offered to the divine. We'll do a meditation on it in a little bit, but you take this burden, in a way I'm not like a big Bible person, but the Bible talks about it directly when they say you cast the burden. You cast the burden to this great self. You cast this burden to the light or to this power of love. Whatever it is, you're in a horrible marriage. You cast the burden of the marriage to the divine, or the interview. You cast the burden, or the date. Because if you keep going back to that idea that every single thing we're taught is that we have to do it. And even when I was 12 years old, growing up in my very driven Jewish home, there was a little sign above my bed when I was 12 years old that I picked. Nobody made me have it. And I had a sign that said, if you don't do it, it won't get done. That was how I grew up. This sometimes really gets mistaken for passivity. And it has nothing to do with passivity. What this kind of invitation and offering and surrender, all of which really fill this book, what it really has to do with is letting something greater than yourself, which is you. It's your high self, instead of the small self, which is filled with insecurities and fears and competition and scarcity and, oh my God, what if somebody else gets my job, and what if I don't get the promotion I'm supposed to get, and what if somebody takes my partner? All that is the small self. The high self, the great self, is the one that goes, everything that's meant for me will always happen. There's that quality of destiny is what is guiding everything. That quality of, I'm now offering it. Once it's offered to this greatness, once it's offered to this great self that you are, beyond all illusion, that you're only that grasping thing that has to keep making sure that everything that's meant to happen happens. Once that part is no longer the identity, then what takes over is the great self. And what was happening for me is that even though these are not new ideas, you can go back in scriptures from Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity in some ways, Judaism, lots of religions, Islam, they're really speaking about how do you offer things over. But I'm not a religious person. I'm really a spiritual pragmatic. I'm a spiritual pragmatist. And so to me, it was like, how do you do it? How do you let go of control and begin to trust that something larger will guide your actions? Because it's not doing nothing. It's offering it so that the right actions always arise at the right time. You begin to move with the flow. That's what it's about. And that's actually how synchronicity emerges. So you can take any single thing that you're in and imagine, really, whether you even think of yourself as a spiritual person or not, you can take any single thing you're in. I kind of do it all day long with everything, and say to this force of love, I now offer this to you. You decide. Show me the way. If it's not meant to happen now, sometimes it's the timing. It's meant to happen later. If this isn't the right person, open me to trusting that the right person is picked. If this isn't the right opportunity, open me to knowing that the right opportunity can come. It really starts to become like a general language, not just a language, like it really opens everything into being a dance with this divine instead of a push and a force, which ultimately for me took me to adrenal failure. And then I got better from an acupuncturist, and it was this is really how it happened. And one thing I like to say, because I really think this is how it works, is as you begin to live this way, this is actually a line that's from a great non-dualist saint named Nisargadatta Maharaj from India, who lived earlier in the century. He had this line where he said, life begins to happen for you and through you rather than by you. And this is it. It's like everything we're taught in a culture of go, 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 get it all, it has to happen by us. And then here's the problem with having to happen all by you, is that then you can also lose it. Then all these things that like, oh, get it, well, you could lose them at any point because the nature of this world is so impermanent. But if you're offering and you're inviting the divine and you're giving it over and you're saying, make me a conduit. Let everything happen through me. Anybody can say this. I'm not special. I just was desperate and had to learn how to live like this because I got sick. When you begin to do that, it's just what Nisargadatta Maharaj said. Everything begins to happen through you and for you, not by you. And not only for you, they begin to happen for everybody else. This is the thing, is you start to actually become a conduit for the good. In really weird ways, like you get on a bus and all of a sudden, the person next to you ends up, something you need to say to them happens. They end up being next to you because you say one line and they're like, wow, thank you. I needed to hear that. I'm sure you've all had that experience. But it begins to happen more and more and more because you're actually inviting the universe to begin to use you as a conduit because you're offering rather than saying you have to do it all, the small self. I want to give you a really funny example of that. Actually, I don't have a watch, so I don't even know what time I'm on here. You might want to tell me. Okay, perfect. Somebody reached me this week. It's just a good example of how to do offering because I do it for everything. Somebody reached me this week who has a number of books out. And, it's really common for authors to collaborate and hook up with each other. And so somebody reached out to me and, I got this message. Do you want to collaborate with this person and maybe do some events together? Now, if I was thinking of this from my small self, from the mind, which is how we're taught to think, the small self was going, oh, I don't know. Our writing doesn't really have that much in common, right? Now, from a marketing standpoint, it would be, well, you have to, because there's a big market there, and you'll bring your market, and she'll bring her market, and blah, blah. But again, when you're offering things to divine order, you're not doing it purely for marketing, and you're not doing it even from the small self going, oh, I don't know if we'd be a good fit. So what I did is I offered it. And I just said on a practical level, okay, God, universe, this is yours. If it's your idea that I'm meant to collaborate with this woman, make it clear. I'm open. If it's supposed to happen, yes. If it's not a good idea, let it go. So about 20 minutes after I did this, I open up the San Francisco Chronicle, or the weekly, and here's a story with Elvis Costello. And Elvis, the musician, and he's talking exactly in the story about how he's had to learn. He's like written between 400 and 500 songs. And even though he really comes from a background of rock, he's learned how to collaborate with almost anyone. Because his feeling is this is how you really learn. But at the same time, he said, but the key to collaborating with anybody is knowing you never have to lose who you are. So his thing is he'll collaborate with the San Francisco Symphony, he'll collaborate with jazz musicians, he'll do anything as long as he knows I don't care what they think of me, and I don't have to modulate my own message. Then anybody, it's a kind of fertility comes because you're not changing your essence. And I knew in that moment, because I had, to be honest, never opened up a newspaper with an article from anybody about why you should collaborate with people. It was crazy. And there's Elvis Costello. So it was like in that message, I knew in that moment, you should say yes to this woman. That my fear was coming from the place that I would have to lose the purity of, or the essence of what my work was about and somehow accommodate her work. And he's saying, oh, absolutely not. I'll go work with the San Francisco Symphony, and I just come as a rock musician. And then we have this great dynamic of bringing together these different worlds. Anyway, it's the kind of thing that happens for me and can happen really for you, for anybody, all day long. Because as you're taking something, say, like a simple question, do I collaborate with somebody who I'm not so sure I want to? I could have opened the paper and I could have gotten a message that said, no, don't, because that equally can happen. It's like each case is so different. And then you end up not having to come from just a stock response that says, oh, yeah, I don't know about that. Let's just say no, I'm scared. Or, yes, I better say yes to anything because every opportunity is needed. It's like you start to be able to respond to each case because it's offered to the divine. So I'll say one last thing. It's actually a story from the book. I truly think that this energy, this force of love, is always trying to interact. And one of the stories that I have in here, I have a friend who's very cynical about this stuff, and we're very, very good friends. So he's actually fun to hang out with because he's always making fun of me. And so he teaches economics at a university, and he's always teasing this idea of inviting this force of the divine. So in the story, I'm asking him, I'm saying, well, okay, you want to make fun of this, but haven't you ever had this experience where you feel like something greater is clearly trying to get your attention? And so he told me the story that's in the book, that when he was in college, he had a roommate that he was close to. And one night, the roommate went out to a party or something, and it was a big snowstorm. And sometime by midnight, the roommate still hadn't come back. And my brother Michael went to sleep, and by 3 a.m, all of a sudden he woke up with a start, realizing the guy didn't come back. But he's hearing this voice in his head screaming, "Michael, come find me. Come find me." And there's nobody in the room. So he thinks he's going nuts. So he gets in his car. This is all like he's just operating on automatic, which I think many of you have had that experience. The great self takes over. It's the example. The small self is useless. He's going on automatic, getting in the car, and he just starts driving half asleep. And he ends up about a quarter mile down the road in the middle of a snowstorm, finding his roommate plowed into a snowbank, drunk, and stuck. So he gets him, out, gets him in his own car, gets him back to the room. So he's telling me this whole story, like, okay, that happened, but I made that go away, because what I said to him is, how could you have an experience like that and not have some curiosity to want to open up to more? Some force sent you that message that said, screamed your name while you were in this room. He said, look, if I opened up to that, I'd have to change my whole life. Everything I've done has been to just have my small self take the lead and go, and claw my way up. He goes, if I open to this idea that there is this force that knew somehow, clairsentience, clairaudience, whatever you want to call it, let a guy who's a quarter mile away scream in my ear, I'd have to rethink everything. So I love that, because you kind of go, you don't really have to rethink everything. All you actually have to do is put out the barest invitation to say, maybe you'd like to interact with me more. Maybe I can invite you to run the rest of my workday. Maybe I can invite you to take over the relationship I'm in. Maybe I can invite you to show me what the next steps are that you want to have happen in my life. It's like it really starts, and then believe me, it becomes second nature. It becomes, I can't even imagine. When somebody says to me, like somebody said, oh, where are you going to live next? I've been talking about I might be moving. And I said, oh, I've offered it over and I'll be shown where I'm going to live next. And again, I was saying it to somebody who doesn't think this way, and he's like, well, that's novel. And I was like, no, because if you offer it genuinely, and you're saying the highest, most right place for you to live is already selected, and you'll be guided in the perfect time and the perfect way. This is so different than thinking your small self has to run around like a lunatic, figuring out what that place is or what that home is. You're offering it, then you'll be shown the right action. So I'm really not here to convince you, because I think if you take it on as a game, this is how I really advise people do it with the book as well, and is that if you try this as an experiment, say for 3 weeks, to start living like this, you may be very, very surprised by what unfolds, because for a lot of people, all you have to do is unlock the door. You don't have to open it. You just have to turn the key in the lock in the barest way. And maybe we can do a short meditation, and I'll just get you started, because you can feel how to do it. Although you don't even have to do this in meditation. So just focusing on your breath. And taking in a deep inhale and a deep exhale. Breathing in deeply and breathing out. And I'd like you just to bring into your mind something that's a big burden right now, some issue that you're really carrying, that the small self is carrying. Whether it's another person, a job, a family issue, a health issue, anything. I'd like you to imagine that you can take that issue and offer it just as if your hands were cupped and you were giving a present over to a friend. That there's some force of love, kind of eternal Tao, this great wave of energy that holds everything, that you can offer just like a gift that burden over. You may even feel as you do that as if a certain weight is leaving your body. That whatever this thing is, so exhausting. That as it's offered, a certain lightness comes in. And that this force perhaps has been waiting all this time to take it off your hands and show you in the right timing and in the right way the actions to take. And just feel for a moment as if it now belongs, that problem, that weight, now truly belongs to this force of love. It's no longer yours. The perfect solution, whatever it is already selected and will be shown. It's completely offered. You might even feel a deep breath coming into your body that you can just deeply exhale as you give it over. No longer needs to belong to you. Whatever the highest resolution is, you've now created space for this great force to carry the energy and show you the way. And as you're ready, you can slowly come out, bringing that awareness with you. So you can offer things over as much as you want. When it's a topic that's really loaded for me, and because I have a kind of obsessive frame of mind sometimes, I've offered it 100 times in the day. Because the training of the brain is, oh, this is your problem. You have to solve this. You better solve it. You better solve it. A lot of times that isn't what solves things. But the offering creates synchronicity in a way that almost nothing else can, because you're making the room for the solutions to come. Sometimes what you're shown is you really have to work your butt off, and you're shown the action. So it's not passivity. But sometimes what you're shown is do nothing for now. Wait. It's not honored in this culture to do nothing and wait. Everything is go, 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 get it, get it, get it. But sometimes you could feel that when you offer it, the message you get is nothing, wait, be still. It's not time yet. It's the beauty of this. You start to be able to move the same way the seasons move, or the same way animals even know how to move. We just get a little confused as people, I think, because that's how we're taught. Anyway, and I think if you read the book, you'll get a much deeper sense of how to do this, because it's really part of our birthright to reclaim that ability to offer and invite and receive. Brings solutions that sometimes almost nothing else can. Also, it reminds you who you actually are, which is not the small self. It's the great self. Anyone. So I'd love to open this to questions, too, because that's fun, if you have any.
So if you're doing this and you read the book, how do you practice this, or is there any way to get support in doing this?
Okay. Yeah. Well, one of the things that happened on the website, I have a website that you probably can see on the book, but it's toshasilver.com. And one of the things that we created on the website were courses and ways for people to learn how to practice this, because, again, very little in the culture says to think this way. So, especially if you go onto the website in the near future, we have a forum starting that is basically a way that anybody can join and work with support and answering questions, and sort of an intentional community online for learning how to let the divine take the lead, because it takes practice. It really is like developing a muscle. It's almost like developing a dormant part of the brain, the part of the brain that rules surrender, openness, invitation, offering, and yet knowing that that's actually where a lot of the most inspired action comes from. So, yeah, if you go to the website, there's a forum starting in about 2 weeks. There's a new course on outrageous openness that Simon & Schuster just put together that is a good basics of how to follow the ideas in the book. So there's help.
Let's say I, just like your friend, like it sounds interesting. I'm open to this idea, but I just feel like it's not for me, and I'm not sure I believe in the divine. It's not something I really feel rooted in. So if I were to just say, how would I know if that's just coincidence, or why should I try this if I'm happy, if I'm doing what I do and it's all working for me already? What would you say to me or those that think along those lines?
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, despite the fact that I come from a family with 6 rabbis, I'm actually not an evangelist for this way of living. What I would say is, if you're really happy with the way your life is, don't use this. I'm getting this message to people that sense something lacking. And I think that everybody's in a different place. So if you get a message inside, I think also part of the problem is the words like God and divine really trigger some people. And I write about it in the book, because actually what's really funny is this book has a fan base among atheists and agnostics, because you don't actually have to use the word God. I have somebody else that I know, and he's always saying, oh, I don't believe in any of this. And I said to him, imagine that the same force that makes a tree grow. You know, you really can't say you don't believe in trees. Something is making that tree grow. You know, something is keeping a bird afloat in a way that, what I did with him, and it's funny because he lives this way too, and he was about as skeptical as you can get. What I'll really say to anybody is, if you have no interest in this, don't do it. Doesn't matter to me. If it's sparking something in you, that's how you know. You get that place inside of you that goes, this is speaking to something in my heart that's an undeveloped part of this culture. Now, it's not for everybody. But if you feel that, then what I'll say to people is, try it as an experiment. If you really feel that skeptical, but you have a curiosity, curiosity is a beautiful thing. Try it as an experiment. You don't even have to know who that force is that you're inviting. Because to me, it's, there's a great line that says the God that atheists don't believe in never existed anyway. So that's how I see this, is like, it's not this idea of the God in some sky with a long beard issuing orders. It's a force of love. Most people believe in love somewhere because they've experienced love somewhere. So what this is actually about is inviting in that force of love as an experiment and beginning to offer pragmatically things to it. So.
Do you think that people who practice living their life in this way, that they ultimately end up making decisions and living their life in a way which is for the greater good? I was thinking about the examples you were giving about the business deal or the contract and I was just trying to imagine how if you were asking for the divine to lead the way, then I don't know, I just felt like I had a revelation that it seemed like then that it would be always, whatever you did would be for the good of all, because you wouldn't make decisions that would be somehow hurtful
Yeah. I love that question, actually, because I have had examples of that. I mean, since the book came out, there's just been all these thousands of letters that have come from all over the place with kind of crazy examples of people that were beginning to live this stuff. And this woman wrote me just that, and she said that she had taken a job that she really didn't like because she was getting paid really, really well, and the perks were great, and that as she started to use the book isn't saying quit your job. And it's not saying stay with your job. It's saying invite this force of love to show you the way. So what happened for her was it really, once she offered over and she's like, do you want me to keep this job or not? The message started to come again and again. Wow, you are miserable in that job, no matter how much money you're making. It was an inescapable message for her. And so, she just wrote me and she said in the end, she took her savings, she had a lot, she opened a boutique. And it was something she never would have had the courage to do because she would have thought her friends thought a boutique was ridiculous. And she's really happy. So it wasn't like she was hurting anybody by having that job, but she was hurting herself. And I think what you're talking about, it expands out in a lot of different dimensions because the way we're taught to think is, what do I want? How do I go get it? It's very different. Even when you're looking at books like The Secret, that some people might be familiar with, the whole focus is, how do I manifest what I want? This is very different. This is saying, I'm inviting in the great self that lives inside everybody, not the guy in the sky, but this force of love, and saying, you show me the highest, most inspired actions. I think you're right. Over time, the more you're aligning with that, the more people are benefiting. There's a really good line from Hafez, the Sufi poet, some people may know, and he said, be the person that everybody's luck changes when you walk in the room. And I don't think you have to go be some saint in Persia to live like that. I think anybody can live like that. Once you stop thinking just, how does my small self go get everything it wants? And you're actually thinking, how do I offer this over to be shown what actions to take? If that's an idea that intrigues you, I would just say go play with it. That's all.
This is more of a comment and a request more than a question. So I've read the book, given it to lots of people. Don't know if they've read it. but a comment is, I love the request is, could you talk more about the format of the book and the inspiration for that? And the comment is, the format of the book really worked so well for me. It's, 2, 3, 4-page little anecdotal stories based on your life, on the stories of your friends. I think on it from, they were excerpts from columns that you used to write in the San Francisco Examiner. And so sometimes I tell people, open the book, pick it up. Whatever you open to is perfect.
Yeah.
You can read a little bit at a time. For me, each story, because it's about real life and real people, it's entertaining. I could sit with it, and the message sometimes would appear to me immediately, or I would sit with it, and it's just a really cool format. So I just wanted to say that and ask you maybe if you could speak about it a bit.
Yeah, I love that you're saying this thing about this joke that the book is an oracle. And I'll say this to people, I'll say, it's not a book you have to read start to finish, like a conventional book. You can have a question, and you can simply say, what do I need to know about right now about my landlady? And then you just open it up. And it's really kind of fabulous that way, because you can get, in a sense, you could use any book. You could go use the phone book that way, too. I mean, you could use anything, but this book has a certain alignment with using it that way. And, the other thing I think about what you're saying is that kind of goes back to what Rachel was saying earlier. People come to this book when they're ready. That's why I don't believe in twisting anybody's arm. When somebody's ready for it, they're on fire. And I get these letters from all over the world, and they're like, I started the book, I've destroyed my life now because I missed 2 days of work. I did nothing but read it. I completely obsessed with it. I went and I bought 40 copies for everybody I know. There's that kind of person. Then there's somebody else, they read it and they're like, I don't relate. And I'm like, that's okay. And then somebody else says, I picked up the book, I read 2 pages, it wasn't my thing, a year went by. Oh my God. A year later, I can't stop reading it. Because they went through an inner evolution that made their soul hungry for what the message of the book was. Or somebody else writes and they'll say, going back to what you just asked, they'll say, you know, somebody gave me this book. I know it's an interesting book. A lot of people give it to their exes. Like, here, I want you to evolve. Here's this book. And it's like, screw you, I'm not reading this book. So somebody said, you know, my ex-husband gave me this book, and I thought it was sort of witty and funny and, you know, a good time. Thanks for writing it. Then they write me a year later, and they're like, oh, my God, I read it again. I actually read it 3 more times. I understand what you're doing now. It's not just witty, funny stories. You're actually showing people how to hand their lives over to a force greater than themselves, and how to let a force of love guide things so that the burden that the ego is always carrying doesn't have to struggle like this. But, you know, for some people to write, they're reading it 3 times. And then they're like ready. So I kind of love that. It's like, you know, movies that you like, that sometimes you see them, they keep meeting you wherever you are. I mean, Groundhog Day is even that way. Like, I kind of love that crazy movie. And each time you see it, you like see a different piece of it. So that's what I say to people is, it comes to you when you're ready. Go experiment with it. And it will meet you where you are.
I just have one other question to make, and it reminds me of just the whole control issue, and how much are you willing to let go of your own control of your life, whatever it is, or your aspect, or the certain question, and it's hard. Everybody wants to control. I know I want to have say in what I'm doing. Like, that is my goal sometimes, and if I don't, then it's a freak out moment, or I don't want to be there, or it's resistance, you know. So it's a good, and even at the simplest way, I would say it's like a example of control, just like it's an experiment of control, if nothing else.
Yes, and it's a good point, because what I would call it is the illusion of control in the first place. The absolute and utter illusion of control that the culture indoctrinates into us moment after moment, that we're actually making everything happen from the place of the ego. And in fact, that's what any good surfer will tell you. I mean, I got so influenced by this very good female friend of mine who's a wonderful surfer. And she's like, this is like a surfing treatise, because any surfer worth their weight knows how to go into the ocean. You can develop all the skills. You know, it's not saying don't get good at what you're doing, but you ultimately only become a great surfer when you know how to let go into the wave. And so that's actually what this is about. It's that there's this illusion of control. You're not letting go into something outside yourself that wants to hurt you. That's, again, the illusion of a culture that I think is, you know, maybe teaching fundamentalist religious ideas of a divine. But when you're starting to talk about a force of love, what you're letting go into is your highest good. And so it's the best thing I can say about it is that if you approach it as a playful experiment, as opposed to this big, heavy thing like, oh, how can I go force myself to let go? But you're taking it as a playful experiment. Like, oh, here's this issue, and I keep trying to control it. Let me playfully offer it over to the divine and see what happens. I have a second book, by the way, that's coming out in May from Simon & Schuster, and it's called Change Me Prayers. And it's a continuation of these ideas, because it's going along with what Rachel's bringing up, that you can actually do prayers that invite the divine to shift you. So if you're somebody who's always saying, I have to control everything, I freak out if I don't control everything, it's another invitation. You can actually say, help me shift into allowing things to occur in the way that's for the highest good, because it's the reiteration over and over of, oh, I'm a control freak, oh, I freak out, that keeps telling the small self that that's the truth. But all of this is about what happens when the invitation is made to begin to make these things safe. It's actually, I kind of love Brené Brown's work on vulnerability. People are familiar with it. And it's very similar from a different perspective, but compatible, where you're saying what happens when you begin to make yourself vulnerable to a force of love. You know, not to something that wants to harm you, but to a force that actually wants your highest good. So,
Thank you, Tosha.
thank you.